I'll welcome to the podium Member Mark Davis, whose classification is Financial Advisors and Wealth Management, who will introduce Steve and Eugene. By the way, Mark advocated for and secured these speakers to increase our understanding of their story. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. It's a real joy today to be back at Seattle Rotary, the most important podium in Seattle, introducing Steve Fleischmann. Over the years, Steve and his family have spoken to Seattle Rotary a number of times. First, his wife Patty spoke to us about Stolen Youth, an organization she founded with Jenny Meisenbaugh to inspire hope and freedom to teens who are imprisoned in sex trafficking. Then Steve and his daughter, Hannah, spoke to us on the family impact of cancer and the potential cures for prostate cancer. Next, their son, Jack, who's with us today, Patty and Jack are here, spoke to us on inspiring hope and confidence to teenagers who are more alike than different. Organization called Friendship Circle. Today, Steve is here to share his working with Eugene Youngblood, who was told at the age of 18 that he would always be in prison for the rest of his life. Truly a story of inspiring hope, belief, and in the power of freedom. Please welcome back one of the most inspiring champions of freedom I know and hope, Steve Fleischmann.
Thank you very much. You know, I used to speak a lot on prostate cancer and I cried a lot. And I would do fundraising events and they would say, if you cry, you're gonna get another couple $100,000. And I'm here today and I actually feel like crying. And this happens to now be about men serving time in prison. So I don't know what's going on. But I first wanna thank all my friends who have come today to watch and to see me and to see Eugene. It means a lot to me and my wife, Patty, and of course, my son, Jack. Anyway, I want to first tell you how I got involved in being interested in prisons, because I think it's kind of a unique subject that all my friends know about me. So my father had an office equipment company in Seattle. And as a kid, 10 years old, I would be there all the time. And my dad had a contract with Boeing. He had an office equipment company and he would have typewriters picked up from Boeing that were broken. He would bring them back to his company and fix them and sell them back to Boeing. And the men that worked in his service department were all men that had been released from prison, both from Monroe and Walla Walla. And I was so curious and engaged as a young boy and spent hours with these guys every week, talking to them, being interested, asking questions, a 10-year-old, but they would talk to me and they cared that I cared. And so that's where my unique, deep passion and commitment started. So I will fast forward into, I became at Monroe State Penitentiary a full volunteer. And what that means is I get to come and go without having to be escorted except by the guards. I came up with an idea for a mentoring program. And it would be the first that ever was established at the Monroe prison. And that would be where it was like a three-legged stool. I would have a man who was serving 1 year or less as the main part of the three legs, a community leader being the mentor, with me being the first. And I realized that I could only be there or any of these mentors once in a while. So I asked if men that were serving life sentences or lengthy sentences would be the third leg of that stool so they could be with that person on a day-to-day basis to keep that person in a guiding light to make sure that that person could get released. Well, it turned out when they had 1 year left, they got removed to a different facility. So it kind of broke down that program. But what happened, which was a huge gift, is I became where I was meeting on a regular basis with these men in a room serving life sentences or lengthy sentences. And of course, that's where I met Eugene Youngblood. Also, I got involved with the Concerned Lifers organization that meets every Monday night in Monroe. And I would sit in there and just listen and every once in a while say something. But more important, the impact that these men had on me for years. And I would bring in friends and community leaders to join me to come into the prison to sit with us. And all we cared about and all I cared about was talking to them, telling them, of course, my story, but what they wanted was to be heard and to be seen and to be visible. And that was my main concern. And that was also where I fell in love with all these guys because of who they are as people, their authenticity, and how I just learned what incredible human beings they are. And of course, my relationship with Eugene just kept building to become deeper and deeper. Then comes the most important part. And I didn't know when I first met Eugene that this was kind of happening, but that was this clemency hearing. So after it got established that a hearing was now, a date was set, it was set for June 6, 2019. So in between, up to the point of the clemency hearing, I actually got engaged with his attorney. I worked with him, doing anything I could to become a part of Eugene's team, because of course this would be the most important day in his life, to potentially be freed from prison. So on June 6, 2019, I drove to Olympia. I was in the hearing, the room, the large courtroom, 3 judges. There was Eugene up on a big screen like this because he was in Monroe. So all he could do was hear us, but we could see him. And the hearing went on, and it was the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. And by the way, I was sitting next to Eugene's 2 daughters, his ex-wife, who had no idea who this guy was. And during this hearing, I would look up at Eugene, I would see him tearing up, and I would start crying. So this whole room would see this guy in the front row bawling and still had no idea what I was doing there. Anyway, most important, after 3 hours, after the deliberation, because they decide while you are there, all 3 unanimously said that Eugene should be freed. And of course, Eugene is crying up on this big screen. I am bawling and I'm hugging his daughters and his ex-wife, who still have no idea who I am. And I don't even know to this day if they do. I think now they do. So anyway, now I need to move to the next part. So that was June. Comes August, Eugene's still in prison. Nothing's been done. And I'm invited to a Governor Inslee fundraising event. I arranged with the people that were hosting the event that I could have a 20-minute one-on-one meeting with the governor. So they set that up. So I sat with Governor Inslee, and he had a glass of wine, I had a glass of wine, and I said, Governor, you're sitting here with a glass of wine. I'm enjoying my glass of wine. And this is how I started out my conversation. And while we're sitting here having this discussion, enjoying this wine, there's a man sitting in prison that 3 people you appointed unanimously said he should be freed, and he's still sitting there. And so I just started going, and what are you gonna do? I need you to sign the clemency paperwork. Anyway, long story short, he made a commitment to do so. Well, that didn't happen. And more months went by, and I'm writing letters, and I became a dog on a pant leg. I mean, a dog on a pant leg. And I did not give up. And then I would have some of my friends that are very visible community leaders write letters, and I had them follow up. And then I kept writing letters. And I'm sure at this point, Governor Inslee just wanted me out of the picture, but I just wouldn't give up, to the point a good friend of ours is friends with Trudy Inslee. And I had Trudy Inslee, Governor Inslee's wife, talk to him. That's a fact. So anyway, I think the most important thing is that I would go back into Monroe, and I would promise Eugene, you're going to be free someday. And after 22 months of serving time after the clemency approval, 22 months, Eugene Youngblood on March 5th, 2021 was finally freed. So I would now introduce my good friend, Eugene Youngblood.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would just stand at the podium, but they didn't make that for like regular sized people. I don't know what's going on. Man, that was a fantastic introduction. So great. In fact, to tell you the truth, I kind of want to go sit back down because he made me sound so amazing. I don't want to miss nothing I might say. But in all seriousness, if you know Steve, then you know that that introduction was emblematic of who he is. Steve Fleischmann is personification of selflessness. And Steve is always putting others in front of himself, which also adds to the motto, or one of the mottos of the Seattle Rotary Club, which is service over self. And so Steve is a person who lives that out. He doesn't just talk it, he doesn't just see it, he lives that out. And not only does he live that out, that's something that he brought to us when we were inside of prison. And so that we could start living like that, service over self, right? And so it became a situation where now things have become more important than ourselves, which end up putting us in a better place, and we could be free even without coming out, right? So anyway, I would like for you to give Steve another round of applause for me. Thank you so much. When I came here today, I was a little bit nervous. I'm standing over here at the table and I'm talking. I meet a young man from Princeton, and we're going back and forth about some things. And one of the things he asked me, he's like, hey, you know, you're pretty nervous. Are you nervous? He said, how long have you been out? I said, man, I just got out in March, you know, and he says, wow, like, how do you feel? And I said, man, to tell you the truth, I feel great. And he says, well, why do you feel so great? I said, because I'm a regular citizen. And he says, well, what do you mean you're a regular citizen? So I pulled out my wallet. Excuse me. I pulled out my wallet, and I didn't pull out my ID. I didn't pull out my social security card. And I said, I'm gonna show you what makes me a real citizen. I got a Costco card. You know, I got a Costco card. So any guy with a Costco card is a real citizen, right? Like, so, you know, I just wanted you to know that that's a real story. That's what just happened a few minutes ago. I just had to tell you that. So, Mark, I was looking for the stuff on the board. We can slide up the first slide, second slide, thank you. And so here I have for you just a list of facts. And on purpose, Patty, I didn't tell you there was going to be any math involved because you might not have decided to come, and I wanted you to be here. But can you just take a look at that for 1 second for me? You know, take a look at that for me. So does somebody want to tell me what they think about that? What catches your attention? What's something about that? Okay, my guy in the blue blazer. Okay, number 7. Number 7 says, Los Angeles is the capital of California. It just so happens, I know that Sacramento is the capital of California. And I put that there on purpose. And the reason I put that there is to illustrate for you how conditioned society has become to point out what's wrong. How conditioned we are to show what the flaw is. Now, I could walk around the room right now and ask everybody here, what do they think about this? And some people would have said the same thing. Some people might have said something different. But you know what no one would have said? No one would have said, hey, man, you got 9 right. You did a really good job, man. You got 9 of them right. That's 90%. And so that leads me to ask you this. So do you think, could I just do one good thing in my life and then for the rest of my life do a bunch of bad stuff and then say, because I did that one good thing, now I'm a good person? So I'm gonna answer that for you. The answer is no, because we know that the truth of who you are is how you show up consistently, right? And so the sad part is the opposite is often true. You can do one bad thing in your life, and for the rest of your life, people are gonna try to define you by that. People are gonna always point to that, and that's what's always gonna be important for them. And so as the lawyer and activist Brian Stevenson said so eloquently, all of us, each of us, are all more important and all better than the worst thing we have ever done. And that's just something, before I really start, that's something that I really want you to take heed to and really want you to understand, because we've all made mistakes. We've all made bad judgments. We've all sinned in some kind of way. And yet here we are today at the Seattle Rotary Club, enjoying a luncheon and being together, and we're moving forward, despite the fact that we've done something wrong, right? Now, your wrong might not have cost you 29 years of your life like mine did, but everybody has done something wrong like that. So I once read that in order to define an organism, you have to first define the environment the organism comes from. And with that in mind, I just wanted to say that I was born in the 1970s, 1973 to be exact, born in the 1970s and raised in the 1980s in Los Angeles, California. At the time, it was the gang capital of the world. And as a young man, my mother went to prison when I was 3 months. And so I didn't have a relationship with her on a regular basis. My father wasn't at home and he wasn't in the family, but my paternal grandmother raised me. And she took me to see my mom every weekend at the California Institute for Women in Chowchilla, which is the maximum security prison for women in California. And so we go in there every weekend, and sometimes I would even spend the night at what you call a trailer visit. And so that's how I had to bond with my mother. And so this went on until I was 10 years old. When I was 10, my grandmother died. And when I was 10, nobody would take me to see my mom no more. So I didn't get a letter from her. I didn't get no phone calls from her. I didn't get to see her no more. And I basically fell into the street. So to no surprise of anyone, I became a gang member, right? And so I become a gang member and I'm growing up in this community and I'm living my life, going through the trials and tribulations that I'm going through, you know, and a lot of my friends don't have their dad in the house. That wasn't a significant impact, but I didn't have my mom, you know, and that was a different kind of thing. You might think, well, you lose one parent, right? But I didn't have my mom. And for a young boy growing up, not having your mom was a real difficult thing for me and something that I couldn't really put together in my emotions, and I couldn't handle stuff. So emotionally, even though I grew and I matured, emotionally, I was kind of stuck and stagnant. I couldn't get past a certain point because I didn't have that cultivation, that care, the cuddles and hugs and things that you needed, pats on the head and things that you needed to grow. So long story short, I got arrested at 18 years old. I came to prison, and man, the landscape of prison in the early 1990s was not like it is today. Today, if you go in prison, especially amongst Black and brown people, what you're gonna see is mostly young people. You're gonna see mostly guys 25 and younger. Well, in the early 1990s when you went, there were very few young people. Like I was a handful of people were under 21, just a handful. And so there I was, I had been a boy masquerading as a man all of this time, and here it is now. I'm in this prison with most of these guys around me are twice my age, and I'm just trying to figure out, how am I going to navigate this brave new world? How am I going to get through this? And I'm going through the motions. And sad to say, I spent the first 10 years of my incarceration the same way I did when I was free. I was a gang member, I was hustling, I was getting in trouble, all these things, because I thought in my head, well, if I got sentenced to 65 years in prison, and in Washington State, there is no parole. So 65 years in prison is really a life sentence. So I'm believing that I'm never gonna get out. And my behavior and my attitude is acting in such a way, right? And so it wasn't that when I was younger that I didn't have any morals or values. It's that my morals and values were mixed up, if not even upside down. I valued vice over virtue. I was ashamed of things I should have been proud of. And I was proud of things that I should have been ashamed of because I didn't have an understanding. And so for the first 10 years of my life, I just thought, what difference does it make if I be good, or if I follow the rules, or if I do this? So I just kept going. And then I had, you know, what some would refer to as like an aha moment. And so in my aha moment, like Steve told you, I got 2 daughters. So in 2001, which was my 10th year there, they came to visit, and I had gotten into a fight, and I got sentenced to 30 days isolation because I had got into a fight. And over the course of that 30 days, they had came to visit and they sent them back. They told them they couldn't come in. So my 11-year-old daughter didn't really understand. So she was like, what do you mean I can't come in? My dad is in there and I want to go see my dad. And so they wouldn't let her come in. So after 30 days, she came back. They came back. And so when she came back, her mom was like, hey, you got to explain to her what happened. She needs to know how come she couldn't come in. And so I had to sit with my 11-year-old daughter and tell her, hey, you know, I messed up. I got in a fight. I've been breaking the rules. And, you know, when you break the rule, you know, real parents speak, do as I say, not as I do, right? So I was like, hey, listen, this is why you got to follow all the rules, because then you get on punishment. And when I got on punishment, they didn't want to let you see me because they knew that's what was really important to me. And so I couldn't see you. And she's just sitting there. She's looking at me with these doe eyes. And then just like an 11-year-old, she don't have no filter. She says, Dad, can I ask you a question? And I say, yeah, go ahead. And she says, if you're already in prison, how come you still getting in trouble? How come you still fighting people? I don't understand. You already in prison. And the crazy thing was, I had never even thought about that. I just was living my life. I never even thought about that. And it made me so sad. And I just sat there and I was just thinking, while we were at visit, I couldn't even concentrate and play with her or nothing. And I was just like thinking in my head, like, wow, like I'm 28 years old. I've been here for 10 years. I'm not growing or maturing any. I've just gotten older. And I was like, man, this is crazy. So what I want to tell you next is that I walked out the door, and then from there, everything went great in my life, and I became like a saint or a pastor or something, right? But that's not how it works, because we know that transformation in life is not linear. It doesn't happen on a straight line. Sometimes we still go left when we're supposed to go right. Sometimes we take 3 steps back just to get 2 steps forward, right? And so we go through these things in life, and we're having this type of thing to understand what happens. And so it took me a while, but finally I got my life on track. And the first thing I said to myself is, hey, I know what I'm gonna do. I can still be a gang member, but we can start doing good stuff. And I start having guys write essays. I start having guys get their GED. I use my leadership to tell guys, hey, you guys got to get into class. Hey, you guys got to start getting GED. This is what's going to happen. This is how we're moving now. And then the reality hit me after a while that no matter what the good behavior was, the bad mindset was going to always corrupt that. And it was always going to go back astray. So there was no way for me to do something right that was already wrong. There's no right way to do something wrong. So I had to get all the way out of the game. And so once I did that, the next step I came to myself was I didn't want to harm anyone. So I said, okay, I'm not going to harm anyone anymore. And I lived like that in prison for probably like a year and a half. I'm not going to harm anyone. And then I came to the reality that not harming anyone is not enough. I have to help people. Not harming people is not enough. Now I got to help people. So I became a mentor. I became a teacher's advocate. I became a TA in the GED class, helping guys get their GED. I work with all kind of guys across the line, across racial lines. I work with the young gang members. I worked with everybody I could work with so that we could make sure that young guys could see, if not nothing else, they could see a model of somebody who was living a life. Even if I was going to be in prison the rest of my life, I was living my life in such a way that people could look at me and say, hey, there's hope, there's light, and there's things that I could do to be a man of integrity. I could be a man of honor, and those things can consist and they can exist within prison. And so I lived my life like that in such a way that somebody talked to me and said, hey, you know, you should apply for clemency. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, you know, I don't know. You know, that sounds far-fetched. You know, I got to convince the governor. One of the steps of clemency is you have to convince the governor that you're extraordinary. And I was like, I don't think I meet the criteria of extraordinary. Like, what does that mean? Who can really define what that means, right? And so we go through the process. Long story short, we go through the hearing. We have the hearing. The 3 panel judges say that Youngblood's transformation has been much more than remarkable. It has been extraordinary. And all the people that he's helped and all the things that he's done, this has been so fantastic that we're going to decide to vote. And it was a unanimous vote so that I could get free. So the next thing that had to happen was the governor still had to sign off. And so it's a process that usually takes 3 to 4 months. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and let me backtrack, I skipped over. I told you about my mom went to prison when I was young. Well, my mom got out of prison in 1994, which means I was 21 when she got out, which also means I was on my 3rd year in prison. So I didn't still have contact with her until 2002. In 2002, we reconnected and we were able to build our relationship from there. And she was coming to see me. She was coming to visit me. She was engaging with my children, and we were building as a family. And even though I was in prison, it was really a loving and caring relationship that made me feel so good. So the first thing I thought when I got clemency is, man, I'm gonna get to go home. I'm gonna be with my mom, and she's older. I can kind of take care of her. Everything is gonna be fantastic. Like, I never thought about this. And you hear a story like mine, and you often hear people say, well, you often hear the guy who ends up getting out, or the person who ends up getting out, say that they were determined, that from day one, they knew that they weren't gonna spend the rest of their life in prison. For me, it wasn't like that. Like, for my own mental health, I had to accept the reality that being in prison, I was probably going to be there for the rest of my life. So I really thought that I wasn't getting out all the way into 2019 until we go into this clemency hearing. Like, I'd never thought about it. I never decided, never used to have these fanciful thoughts about what it would be like to be free. Nothing. I just was staying inside, and that was my world. And that's how I had to do it to maintain my mental health. And so now I'm on the verge of being free. And I'm just thinking, man, how great this is going to be. I get to see my children. My oldest daughter is a teacher. She had just graduated with her master's degree. And I was like, man, this is my chance. You know, I get to be engaged and involved in this stuff. I get to be with my mom finally outside of a prison existence. This is going to be great. And lo and behold, it didn't work out that way. And Steve was mistaken. It didn't take 22 months. It took 18. So it took exactly 18 months for the governor to come back. It took 22 months for me to get free, but it took 18 months for him to sign off and say that he was going to let me out. So he signed off in December to tell me that he was going to let out. The bad thing about that is my mother died in September. So I didn't have the opportunity to be engaged in relationship with my mom outside of prison. And that hurt me so bad. I lost hope. And so you've heard the old phrase that it's better to have loved and lost than never have loved before, right? And so that might be true when it comes to matters of the heart. But when you really think about it, when it comes to hope, man, you don't want no hope and then have somebody take it away from you. Man, it can't be a worse thing than that. And so I was distraught. Like, I was really sad and distraught, and I was in this bad place. And so when the governor finally decided he was going to release me, signed the paper to release me in December, it still was a process for me to get out. So January the 8th, exactly 30 days after he signed the order, it was the day after my 48th birthday. My birthday is January 7th. On January 8th, I tested positive for COVID. Not only did I test positive, I had to be taken to a hospital, and I was suffering real bad. I couldn't breathe. I had to get an oxygen treatment, and I'm laying in my cell. And what they do to you there is they put you in isolation. So they treat you as if you did something wrong. So I was in isolation in a cell by myself, locked in 23 hours a day, not being able to, well, 24 hours a day, 5 days of the week, 23 hours a day, 2 days a week. I got to come out for an hour, but I couldn't even come out because I was so sick and I was hurting. And I just kept thinking, man, this could only happen to me. Like, I'm going to die before I get the chance to be released. Like, I fought all this hard, all this long, and I thought, man, I'm going to get out. It's really going to happen. Like, this is really coming true. And then now I'm thinking, man, all this bad stuff that happened to me in my life, man, can I just get one thing to happen good? And I was just thinking, man, if something good ever happened to me, I'll probably throw up. Because, yeah, really though, because, and I can see the laughter, because you hear, you know, you laugh when you hear the reality, right? The reality in that, you can feel that the reality was, I thought, man, if something good happened to me, I'll probably throw up. So I stayed 21 days in treatment because I was doing really bad. You're supposed to stay 14. I stayed 21 days in treatment. I was doing bad. And then all of a sudden, I just got better. And I don't know what happened. I just got better. And physically, I got stronger. And I was able to overcome it. So March the 5th, it was my release day. I get out, I'm released. And so I'm released on a Friday, and the first thing I do is I have to wait for kindergarten to get out so I can go see my daughter, because I want to take her and go push her on the swing. So now I see you trying to do the math. My daughter is the kindergarten teacher. So I have to wait till she get out of school, and I want to push her. The first thing I did was I want to push her on the swing. So I took her to the park, and I went and got my other younger daughter, and we out there playing, running around in circles. I'm pushing them on the merry-go-round and stuff. And then I say, thank you for indulging me, you know, for allowing me to do this and feel like this, because it was so important and impactful for me to be able to do that with them. So I was able to do that. The next thing happened is I was offered a job at a nonprofit called the Freedom Project. And so, you know, I end up taking the job, and what it ended up being is I really just do the very same thing now that I did when I was inside. I mentor people. My position is, my title is called Care Coordinator. And because I care, and because, so what I do is we provide services to people, wraparound services to help them get back on their feet or become situated or even transition from being incarcerated. And so what ended up happening is now I'm able to do what I was doing inside, outside. So it's really easy for me. And my transition has been really seamless, right? So I know I only have a couple of minutes left. And as I end this, I really want to tell you the impact of my relationship with Steve. And in order for me to do that in such a short time, what I'm going to have to do is give you an analogy. So when I got out, one of the first things I realized is how important a mobile phone was. And I'm thinking, everybody has phones, even little kids 10 years old. So somebody gave me a phone. So one day I got my phone, I'm running around. I'm like, man, the phone is the greatest thing ever. How did I not live without a cellular phone? Like, how did this happen for all this time? And what I realized was I didn't know, nobody told me about charging it. So I'm in the mall one day, I'm walking around and I'm trying to, and it ain't working. I'm like, man, this is useless, man. What's going on? And so my friend is like, hey, you didn't charge it. And so what I'm telling you is, think about this. I thought I was the cellular phone, and I thought that I was the greatest. I thought that I had did all this stuff on my own to mature and grow, transform, and become who I was, right? But Steve was my charger. And so I needed a charger. I needed somebody to charge me up, to make me be and continue to be as good as I can be. So please indulge me right now. Close your eyes for just 1 second. And just think real hard about, you're the cellular phone, and who are the chargers in your life? Who are the people who are charging you up? And I have one ask, and when you leave here today, I want you to tell the people who you charging and who's charging you up how much you love them and appreciate you. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Steve and Eugene, for sharing your remarkable story of your experience.